Members, good morning. It's the appointed time. We have a quorum. Let's invite the administration representatives to join us.
I'd
like to ask members now, do we need to invite the public to hold a deputation hearing? No? All right. Good morning. In this meeting today, we are going to have a policy discussion of the bill. Afterwards, we'll proceed to the clause-by-clause examination of the bill. Mr. Andrew Lai, Permanent Secretary for the FSTB, please take us through the papers. And for members who would like to ask questions, please press the button to request to speak. Mr. Lai, please. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. Thank you for examining this bill today with us. It is the Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concessions, Concessionary Deductions and Allowances Bill 2026. This bill aims to give effect to the tax concessions, concessionary deductions, and allowances. There are a total of two types: one-off deductions, and two regular increase in allowances. I'm going to give you an overview in relation to one-off deductions. This bill proposes to implement the proposal of the Policy Address 2025. That is, there will be a one-off reduction of salaries, tax under personal assessment, and profits tax for the year of assessment 2025-26 by 100%, subject to a ceiling of $3,000 per case. The government will have revenue foregone of about $5 billion. In year of assessment 2024 to 25, the cap was $1,500, so it is a 100% increase. As for regular allowances, I'm going to take you through the allowances on three fronts. If implemented, the government revenue foregone will total $5.5 billion. First of all, we are going to increase the basic allowance and single-parent allowance from $132,000 to $145,000. As for the married person's allowance, it will be increased from $264,000 to $290,000. We expect to benefit a total of 2.09 million people. And the last time this was adjusted was 10 years ago, that is 2016 to 17. As for the second allowance to be increased, it's about the dependent parent, grandparent allowances and the additional dependent parent or grandparent allowances for each eligible parent, grandparent. And this will increase from $50,000 to $52,000, and this will benefit about 830,000 taxpayers. The last time it was adjusted was 2018-19. The third type of allowance to be increased is for child. In the policy address last year, the chief executive mentioned promoting childbirth. And usually the claim period will only be applicable to the first year. And after the implementation of the proposal, the claim period for additional child allowance for newborns will be extended from 1 year to 2 years. As for the amount of allowance, it will be increased from $130,000 to $140,000. The last time it it was adjusted was 2023 to 24 year of assessment. We expect to benefit 350,000 taxpayers. We understand the public's concern. Why do we only adjust these three types of allowances? Can we increase further? Can we add new types of allowances? We hope the public to understand that in the formulation of the budget by the Financial Secretary, he has taken into account the public, legislators, and political parties' views. But after all, we need to consider the financial resources of the government, so we cannot satisfy all parties in one go. But we'll keep listening to members' views as well as the public. We welcome members' views. That concludes my introduction. If members have questions, we are willing to answer these questions. Thank you. 9 members have pressed the button to request to speak. They are Ms. Nixie Lam, Mr. Wu Yingpeng, Dr. Johnny Ng, Mr. Hong Kam In, Mr. Mark Chong, Mr. Lee Chen Kang, Mr. Gitson Yang, Mr. Albert Tuang, and myself. Each member questions and answers included 5 minutes. Ms. Lam, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. In relation to child allowances, I'm glad to see measures for promoting childbirth. In Hong Kong, it is not at all easy to raise a child. For the first 2 years of raising a child, there are additional child allowances. I'd like to know whether this will be extended further to 3 years. Last year, I mentioned intellectual. Only one side of the parent could apply for the child allowances. It seems many wedded couples are financially independent. If only one parent could apply for this allowance, this is not quite fair. Every year, when people file tax returns, usually mothers probably earn less than fathers, but they do make contributions to the family. Some taxation professionals said that it is not complicated to work out this formula. It all depends on whether the administration wants to make it happen. For this term of the government, probably we can consider adding more flexibility to parents. Basic allowance from $132,000 to $145,000. It hasn't been adjusted for a decade. I'd like to know the factors in deciding the extent. Thank you. Mr. Lai. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Lam, for her questions. First of all, regarding the child allowance, we have proposed to extend the period from 1 year to 2 years. Of course, we understand the longer the better. After all, it costs a lot to raise a child, but we need to take into account the effectiveness and the fiscal position of the government. Ms. Lam's last question is that in relation to basic allowance, which hasn't been adjusted for 10 years, now we are proposing to increase the amount by $13,000. How do we decide on the extent? Say for taxpayer of salaries tax, as for allowances or deductions, there are a total of about 30 items. There are different types of deductions and allowances, say for education, renting a flat, all these will allow a taxpayer to apply for deductions. There's a wide array of deductions and allowances for which taxpayers can apply. These are measures for reducing the taxation burden on taxpayers. Regarding the tax regime in Hong Kong, it is quite simple. In the year of assessment 2025 to 26, we expect that the government's revenue will be $690 billion and salaries tax $200 billion. and $100 billion from stamp duties. And if we really need to increase the amount of deductions, we need to take into account the fiscal position of the government. For instance, if we increase the basic allowance, this will lead to the greatest amount of government revenue foregone. The deductions of the three main taxes will lead to government revenue foregone of $5 billion. We need to take into account the financial burden of the government and the public. Regarding child allowance, we believe parents should be able to work out who will get the deduction or allowance. Well, any follow-up? Speaker off mic just now. Mr. Wu Yingpeng, thank you. The two types of deductions and allowances have responded to society calls. They are worth our recognition. Just now, the Permanent Secretary talked about the government revenue foregone. There will be medium-term to long-term impacts. The government revenue foregone will be $5.775 billion. I'd like to know whether there are any measures to ensure the fiscal robustness of the administration. P.S. Thank you, Mr. Wu. Thank you for mentioning this point. Honestly, it is easy to come up with one-off reductions. However, for longer-term increases in deductions and allowances, these are of greater concern to us because there will be greater impacts in the future. In year of assessment 2024 to 25, the one-off reductions of salaries tax, tax under personal assessment, and profits tax, it was capped at $1,500. And for the year of assessment 2025 to 26, we have proposed to double it to $3,000. Stamp duties, we have an additional revenue of $30 billion, and for profit tax, $20 billion extra. We were actually projecting a minor deficit. However, we have already achieved about $2.9 billion of revenue, or surplus, rather. And the Financial Secretary proposed that we should share the economic fruits with the public. In the past few years, we have already experienced the impact, so we're allowed. The Financial Secretary wants to propose one-off reductions. However, we need to ensure financial sustainability owing to population aging and spikes in healthcare expenditure. Thank you. Next, Dr. Johnny Ng. Thank you. The government has been proposing measures for promoting childbirth, including increasing the allowances for children as well as the newborn baby bonus of $20,000. I'm all for these policies. However, we haven't yet seen a significant increase in the number of newborns. In the previous year, there were only 31,714 newborns. And that was probably due to the effect of the Year of Dragon. The child allowance and the additional child allowance has been increased from $130,000 to $140,000. I'd like to know how the government will promote childbirth and whether there will be further increases in child allowance and additional child allowance. As for dependent parent or grandparent allowances, there are increases in these allowances, and I am all for these allowances. But in addition to the increases in these allowances, is there any other way to provide tax allowances for domestic helpers? Many people in the middle class need to take care of their own parents. Is it possible to implement these policies in order to help people in the middle class? Thank you.
자,
Permanent Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Ng, for your questions. On the encouragement for giving birth, the whole government, you can see that, has used various policies to encourage giving birth. But you can't just rely on the tax policy alone. But for taxation itself, whether the chief executive or financial secretary, in dealing with the child allowance, we have increased the allowance. But I also feel that we can't rely on this policy alone. The government, in reality, has used a basket of measures, for example, giving priority for choosing or applying for public housing unit, and also increased subsidy for childcare and etc. And this could provide more support for parents with newborns. I think that's effective policies. I think whether a child has a child or not is not dependent on what's the child allowance available, but we just think that whatever we can do, we try to do our best. And secondly, I understand that, as Mr. Ng said, quite a number of families actually have been hiring foreign domestic helpers on a regular basis, and whether there should be an allowance given. And we have thought about that. So you need to consider, of course, the government's financial position, and also in terms of implementation, what would be the least controversial arrangement. Let me give you an example. For the hiring of, is it that you can only get tax allowance by hiring foreign domestic helpers? How about local part-time helpers? So we don't want to be half-hearted, and so we need to listen to more opinions first and see what is the best way forward. Next one is Hong Kam In. Thank you, Chairman. I do support the government's latest tax measures, including raising the basic tax allowance and also the allowance for supporting parent and grandparent and so forth, and also support for the allowance for residential care home for elderly. But for support for depending parent or grandparent, and also the allowance for residential care homes, is required that the homes concerned should be in Hong Kong. But now with the integration between Hong Kong and the Greater Bay Area, quite a number of elderly parents have chosen to move to the mainland to stay in the residential care homes there. So I'd like to ask the administration, would you look into, for the two particular allowances, extend them to the Greater Bay Area, the 9 cities there? Do you have such plan, and what is your timetable? If not, then what are the reasons? And also, would you carry out an overall review on the pros and cons of the policy concerned? Thank you. Mr. Hong, for your question. As Mr. Hong mentioned, your understanding is correct. Our plan now, that is for the taxpayers to apply for dependent parent, grandparent allowance, or for the parents and grandparents staying in residential care homes, the parents and grandparents concerned should be living in Hong Kong. So that's the current requirement. It's reasonable in that because from the taxation perspective, if the dependents concerned live in Hong Kong, then it will be easy for our bureau or department to carry out follow-up investigations to ascertain that they are really in Hong Kong. And if we are to relax the criteria to allow or to cover those living beyond Hong Kong, then we need to be careful with that. Mr. Hong's suggestion, I know that it sounds reasonable because with the integration of the Greater Bay Area, well, we have seen the trend, and the government has also got the Fujian or Guangdong schemes to encourage elderly people to retire in the Greater Bay Area in Guangdong. But we need to consider when it comes to implementation, do we just cover the Greater Bay Area or the whole of China? Or for some taxpayers whose parents may be living in Europe or North America, so should they be covered? So we need to look into that. And if we were to relax the criteria, then we also need to discuss with the Bureau, for example, Labor and Welfare Bureau, and see whether they have particular concerns. So we need to study the issue carefully before a decision can be made. Is that okay with you, Mr. Hong? I'm not so satisfied, but no matter what, well, it's the administration that takes the initiative. Okay, next one is Chong Ho Fong. Thank you, Chairman. Lately, I discussed with many young families, and many of them told me they want to have children, but they dare not to do that. The 20,000 cash bonus for newborns and this increased allowance is just better than none. There's still a gap with the family's expectations. The government now is proposing raising the child allowance from 130,000 to 140,000. Despite that, it cannot cover the costly expenses of raising a child. In the future, I'm sure it will be a priority for the government to encourage newborns. So why can't the government be more generous and bring in the progressive taxation scheme that is now the additional child is 440,000, and the third child could be doubling that amount. So if parents pay less tax, then they will spend the money on their children, and that can stimulate local consumption, and the whole society will benefit, and that can encourage more childbirth. So why can't you bring in the progressive taxation scheme for child allowance? I understand Mr. Chong's suggestion. If we were to encourage childbirth, as we said, we need to have multiple considerations and the support of other relevant policies. I'm sure that whether a parent wants to have or a family wants to have a child, it's not just about calculations as well. The sense of happiness cannot be measured by money alone. Whether we can bring in the progressive tax arrangement, various views have been expressed. Some people say that progressive scheme itself, well, if you have 3 children already, they would not have one more child because of the tax regime. But for a family to have a child from being childless, that is already a breakthrough. So why is it that we, for the first child, double the allowance from 1 year to 2 years? That's our consideration. And we don't want to make our tax regime too complicated. So I think we can start off with the current measure first and see what the effect is. Every year, there is a budget proposed, so we can have new measures in the years ahead. Yes, you said that children can bring forth a sense of happiness and yet also be a source of pressure. So if you have additional tax measures, then that can reduce the pressure on families. But I'm glad to hear that you are not saying that the answer is definitely no. So maybe in the coming years there could be a new measure. So please consider our suggestion. Next one is Lee Chung-Keung. Thank you, Chairman. Well, if you have a child, you'll be worried about them for many, many years to come. And I understand. I have 2 children myself. I understand what you mean by the sense of happiness. But the educational medical expenses do pose increased pressure on us, be with inflation and so forth, and also for tuition expenses and studying abroad and so forth. So last year, after you've removed the tuition subsidy, many middle-class families have told us, well, the Liberal Party's consideration for a progressive tax regime can really help those families when it comes to education for the children before they reach the age of 18, and that can really ease their financial pressure. So I hope that Permanent Secretary, you can seriously consider our suggestion. And for supporting parents, for parents who are living with the child and for parents who are not living with the taxpayers, there are 2 types of tax allowances. People in Hong Kong do not live in spacious flats, so some parents may move to another flat or another building who may still come back to the taxpayers' flat for dinner, or they may still be supported by their children living away from them. So why are there 2 different allowances? One is from 50,000 to 55,000, and the other is 100,000 to 110,000. There's a big difference, even doubling of an original amount. Now with aging and the pressure of looking after aging parents, now that going to public hospitals is more costly. So will you consider whether the parents are living with the taxpayers or not? The allowance should be fixed at 100,000 and raised to 110,000. Thank you. The progressive tax for children, we've taken noted views of members. And as for allowance for supporting dependent parents, grandparents, yes, you're right. We have 2 types of allowances right now. For dependent parent, grandparent allowance, it will be increased to 55,000, and for those live-in parents, raised to 110,000. We were thinking that if the taxpayer is living with the parent under the same roof, then they will not just be giving them money, but also providing them care on a daily basis. For such filial children, I think it's reasonable, we think, to give them a bigger allowance. So our initial design was based on that rationale. But I understand with Hong Kong's living conditions, to have grandparents, parents, and children living under the same roof, objectively speaking, there are difficulties. Whether we can, as Mr. Lee said, for parents living together in the same building, or do you consider them to be living together with the taxpayers? We need to see how the actual situation is like. Now, the line is very clear. As long as you are living in the same flat with the taxpayer, then they will be entitled to a higher allowance. So in other words, I'm not hoping to argue with you, but in terms of logic, if I talk to my mom every day, does it mean that I'm providing much care for her? Now with advanced technology, with WeChat and so forth, well, you save some money to some extent if you are living together in the same flat with your parent, because you eat together and you share the electricity bills using the same service provider and so forth. So what's your logic that if you live together with the parents, then that means that you are caring more for them? I don't quite see that. And in bygone eras, several generations were squeezed in the same flat. But nowadays, as you said, with even your subdivided flats, you have your minimum criteria for them. So people are living more comfortably. Everyone wants to see that happen. So you need to change your mindset as well. Permanent Secretary, any response? I understand your view, so we'll take that into consideration. But when it comes to the actual living environment, each family's situation is different. Like for parents who live apart from their children, they have their own flat, and then the children give them a monthly payment every month, and would living under the same roof help parents or children save money? It's difficult to say. But I understand Mr. Lee's points, and you have a point, but we'll consider that again.
多謝主席。
Mr. Kisson Yang, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on the allowances for dependent parent and grandparent. With integration with the GBA, a lot of parents are retiring or living in the GBA. If only taxpayers in Hong Kong are eligible for tax allowances, this is not moving with the times. Is it possible to consider extending the allowances? We need to take the first step. Guangdong scheme, Fujian scheme, we don't extend them to all cities in China because there are more people, more Hong Kongers living in Guangdong and Fujian. Can we take the first step? As long as you are living in the GBA or Guangdong or Fujian, and if you can prove that you are providing for your parents, then you are eligible for dependent parent or grandparent allowances. This time, this is not included. I think this is still okay, but within the current term of the government, can we give some thought to this? Otherwise, alongside measures for promoting the integration with the GBA, but if our taxation policies aren't moving with the times, that is not reasonable. As for tax allowances for domestic helpers, we need to take the first step. Sometimes the government thinks too much. Why not take the first step? We can probably offer tax allowances or deductions for domestic helpers. With further surplus on the part of the government, we can consider further extensions. Engaging a domestic helper incurs additional expenditure, just like renting a flat. It is not at all difficult to prove, but we need to take the first step anyway. Otherwise, if we do not take the first step, we're still bogged down in the details and never will we be able to start. I hope that the PS will consider implementing this in the current term of the Legislative Council. As for child allowance, an additional child allowance for newborns increasing from 130,000 to 140,000, and a claim period will be extended to 2 years. The cap is 1.26 million. And the number of beneficiaries is limited. Now parents are unwilling to have children. How many families in Hong Kong have 9 children at the same time? Even if there are, this is something that people are happy about. This is something good. How many people will have more than 9 children in the families in Hong Kong? This is very rare in Hong Kong. So why don't we do away with this cap in order to show that the government has the resolve to promote childbirth? This is not in fact very effective, but this is actually a means to show the resolve of the government. P.S. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Yang, for your views. We understand the importance of taking the first step. Just now, Mr. Yang talked about the allowances and that the government needs to remove barriers. We will take a proactive approach to consider members' views. Regarding child allowances, indeed, the current policies covers the 9 children, but I go along with Mr. Kisson Yang regarding his observations. Why don't we provide recognition to families that have the 10th or even the 11th child? We'll go back and study this in great detail. As Mr. Yang said, this won't incur many costs. In the modern society, it is already difficult to have the first child. If a family has 10 or even 11 children, this is worth our recognition or even praise. We'll go back and study this seriously. Thank you, Mr. Yang. Next, myself. Let me put it this way. I'd like to follow up on the GBA. The FSTB should be aware that retiring in the GBA is the main trend forward. There are over 2 million elderly people in Hong Kong. We have different schemes such as Guangdong scheme, but regarding allowances or deductions, if they aren't applicable to people living in the GBA, then we do need to think about this. If these allowances aren't applicable to people living in the GBA, probably this will impact on their wish to retire in the GBA. This is actually our national strategy, and this has everything to do with retirement in the GBA. Regarding the one-off deductions for profit tax of $3,000 per case, as I understand, there is no mean test to profit tax. Basically, any company, including listed companies, are also eligible for this one-off reduction. $3,000 to a company is just a drop in the bucket. If we don't offer one-off reductions to companies, probably this part of the expenditure could be spent on social welfare. Honestly, $3,000 to a company, the impact isn't as significant. If the government has a lot of surplus, then the situation is different. So I'd like to know whether there will be any vetting in relation to profit tax one-off reductions. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, for your suggestions regarding integration with the GBA. I understand this is our national strategy and this is the main trend forward. This is also a policy being taken forward by the Labor and Welfare Bureau. We will work with the LWB to see what else we can do. But before we have tax deductions or allowances, retiring in the GBA does come with its own advantages, such as lower cost of living, a better living environment, and all these are appeal of living in the GBA or retiring in the GBA. As for one-off reductions of tax, everyone is eligible for these one-off deductions, one-off reductions. All taxpayers, including companies, are also eligible for such one-off reductions. When a company or when a taxpayer pays tax, then tax reductions or tax allowances should be applicable to all taxpayers. Therefore, listed companies or for smaller companies, we allow one-off reductions of $3,000 per case. Regarding profit tax, if you refer to the document, there are a total of 1.5 million companies in Hong Kong. Only 1/10 of the companies totaling 170,000 companies are paying tax. There are only thousands of listed companies in Hong Kong. If we draw a line here, the money saved is actually not significant. For some companies, they may be engaging in charitable events. So this is another factor that we need to consider. That is exactly why we do not want to overcomplicate the one-off reductions. This is not our original intent. While I'm not saying that you need to split it into 2 tiers, I mean, why not do away with it at all? Some companies told me, well, if you give me $3,000, that is just a drop in the bucket. So why doesn't the government engage in charitable affairs? $3,000 to a company really a drop in the bucket. When a company needs to pay profit tax, it's really not that significant to the operation of a company. Mr. Michael Lee, thank you. I'd like to talk about parent and grandparent allowance. I'd like to echo the view of Ms. Nixie Lam. Some people in Hong Kong live with their parents and children. If there are 2 siblings, of course, the situation will be less difficult. They can apply for parent allowance each. As long as one can prove maintenance payment of $12,000 per year, then one can already apply for dependent parent allowance. So why don't you put in place a progressive system about $24,000 or $48,000? Probably you can give some thought to this progressive tax regime. Thank you. P.S. Any response? Thank you, Mr. Lee, for his views. We will consider these views seriously. Any more policy matters? Any more questions on policies? If no, we can proceed to the clause-by-clause examination of the bill. Please refer to the blue bill or the marked up copy, that is CB bracket 3296 2026 brackets 01. I'd like to ask the administration to take us through the papers. Thank you. I'd like to ask Ms. Chen, Deputy Commissioner from the IRD, to take us through the bill. Thank you. I'd like to start with the long title of the bill. The bill is to give effect to the proposals concerning tax concessions, concessionary deductions and allowances in the budget introduced by the government for the 2026 to 27 financial year, and to provide for an increase in the child allowance in the year of assessment following the year of assessment in which a child is born. The short title, the Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concessions, Concessionary Deductions and Allowances Ordinance 2026. Clause 2. The Inland Revenue Ordinance is amended as set out in sections 3 to 6. Clause 3. Section 31 amended. After section 31 brackets 1A, add 1B. In addition, a child allowance granted in respect of a child under subsection 1 is also to be increased by the prescribed amount in the year of assessment following the year of assessment in which the child is born. That is, the claim period will be extended from 1 year to 2 years. Clause 4. Schedule 3C amended elderly residential care expenses deduction for the year of assessment 2026 to 27, the elderly residential care expenses will be raised from $100,000 to $110,000. Clause 5. It amends Schedule 4. For the year of assessment 2026-27 and for each year after that year, the amount will be increased from $132,000 to $145,000, and for married persons allowance, it will be increased from $264,000 to $290,000. And for child allowance and additional child allowance, it will be increased from $130,000 to $140,000. And for dependents aged 60 or above or disabled, it will be increased from $50,000 to $55,000. For dependents aged 55 or above but below 60, the amount will be increased from $25,000 to $27,500. And for additional child allowance, it will be increased from $130,000 to $140,000. And 1B is already added, so the amount $140,000 will also be added. And the total amount for child allowances will also be increased from $117,000 to $126,000 for 9 children at most. Clause 6, Schedule 43 amended. Just a moment, Mr. Lee has a question.
Chairman, as for Clause 1B, child allowance, you added one item. So is it necessary for amendment to be made to I1B? The amendment is in Clause 3 of the bill. And the Section 31, there's the 1B clause added. That is, so you are following what's in our markup copy, right? Yes. Okay, so I'm just following I was following the different order. Okay, anyway, please continue. Let's go to Clause 6 of the bill. This is Schedule 43 amended. Reduction of taxes. That is for the year of assessment 25-26. Salaries tax, profits tax, tax under personal assessment. Allowances be given. So a ceiling of $3,000. That's tax reduction. I think I'm done with the clause by clause explanation. Any questions from members? It's very simple, relatively simple. As for the English copy, I'll ask legal advisor to comment. Thank you, Chairman. On the English text, the Legal Services Division compared it with the Chinese version, and we confirmed that in legally speaking and in terms of the text, there are no issues identified. Thank you, legal advisor. If so, then we will follow up with the government on second reading for the bill and also the day for debate. And we also notify members of our decisions in writing. So there's no need for the meeting. I now declare that the meeting adjourned. Thank you.